Today, I'm joined by Tim Urschinger, co-founder of LIVESciences, a self-managing company, and a co-creator of Teal Around the World, the largest global gathering of self-management ambassadors and one of my personal favourite conferences to attend every year. Tim and I are deep diving into self-management and looking at the areas we need to work on if this style of working is going to grow. So let's get started. Hi, Tim, and welcome to Make It Thrive. Thank you so much for being on the Changemaker sessions.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward.
So, we obviously met through Teal Around the World conference, which is my absolute favourite conference to attend every year. It's just such good vibes, and there's always so much to learn from it as well. I'd love for you to kind of share with our audience a bit more about your organisation, because I think for a lot of people, especially here in the UK, it might sound a bit radical. So I would love for you to just share a bit more about LIVESciences, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, and really glad that you like Teal Around the World. It's kind of our favorite hobby, if you want, and it's always good 1.5 days. Anyway, so life sciences in the broadest sense, we're doing consultancy work. I think the latest buzzword is transformation agency or whatever. I don't know, right? That kind of stuff. Anyway, so working with big multinationals on their transformation journeys. But what was really interesting, I guess, is this Teal setup. So if you look at Teal Around the World and also the Teal idea, then obviously going back to Frederic Laloux and his Reinventing Organizations book from 2014, and it kind of inspired us. Read it through in 2015 and kind of tried to make sense of what he described with the purpose, the wholeness, and the self-management pillar, and created our own little setup, drawing from all sorts of different places: Holacracy, Sociocracy, all sorts of other places that we could find back then in 2015. Was a bit more difficult than today, I guess. But yeah, so it's a self-organized company, obviously. So people don't have a boss, they don't have a line manager they report into. We don't do stupid things like performance management or budgeting or whatnot, right? So, which doesn't mean it's completely chaos. Obviously, there's certain structures, and I guess the most radical thing that people always get excited about is the self-set salaries. So everyone's defining their salaries themselves, completely free range, and it's actually an interesting experience. Always there's interesting dynamics. You can learn a lot from it, beyond salary numbers itself, I guess.
Thank you so much for explaining that. So I know the big thing when it comes to looking at change and kind of, I suppose for you, your kind of catalyst was that Frederic Laloux book. I think like a lot of us, when we read that book, it was kind of almost like, well, this is how work can be done. Why aren't we all doing it this way? So that was the real kind of catalyst for you. I mean, what do you think stops businesses from doing this? Are they missing that catalyst, do you think, to really change? Because we've had so much change over the past 2 years. So what do you think is stopping businesses from kind of changing the status quo, doing something different?
I think on a positive note, there's a lot moving already, right? So this is much better than if you compare to 10 years ago. So there's more and more people thinking about these things. There's also research from Gallup Institute and all sorts of other places where they're like, there's a link of engagement to P&L and bottom line, actually. So it's a good reason to look into your culture in a way. So in that sense, there's good things moving. But then obviously the other side of the coin is if you look at big multinational organizations, 100,000 people or something, right? It's just incredibly complex systems as well. It's not just like, I like the book, so let's just do it tomorrow, right? I mean, that obviously doesn't work. So in that sense, we're back to the change process and to change practice. It's just incredibly difficult to first of all, where are you with that complex system? Because
Mm.
it's not like you just put it on a piece of paper, and that's obviously different for us because first of all, small company, we've always worked like that. We just put it up in the beginning, and it got a certain evolution from there. But obviously, we never had that transformation moment in a sense, right? It was always just the founders liked that idea, I guess, because, for example, I like autonomy as well. I like freedom. I like to not be told, that kind of stuff. So this is a completely different story compared to a transformation. Again, especially if you have a huge organization, and it's just difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think I was reading something the other day that said, we're so much more open to adopting, machines or technology. We're more open to doing that now, but we're probably a lot less inclined to maybe changing our mindset or our perspective on things. That's a lot harder to change around. So I know for you, like when I was listening to your conversation at Teal Around the World about the self-set salaries, because that does get people really excited when you have that conversation, because they're like, what, how does that work? And you were really going into the mechanics of it, but you also said, which is something that's really fascinated me, around sort of self-managing organizations, which I've always had that question of, do we need a mindset shift, or does there need to be that personal development piece in order for you to take that journey? And I know you said, I think you said, to kind of paraphrase, you said something about you have the self-awareness of a stone or something, which made me giggle. But I'd love to hear from your perspective about that awareness shift and that shift in perspective.
Yeah, I think some stones might have better self-awareness than I have actually. So that's definitely accurate. Um, so I guess the difference of mindset shifts and technology that you just kind of get used to in a way is, well, you take away my whatever Apple phone and give me a Samsung phone, and I hate it for 3 days, and then I get used to it and it looks different and everything, but it's just fine. So that's relatively straightforward. Now, if you say mindset shift, I mean, obviously you can tell me, I don't know, be more open-minded, and instead of a fixed mindset, have a growth mindset, and so okay, I get it intellectually, but the thing is, the intellectually getting the whole story is not enough, obviously, and this whole self-reflection, self-awareness, self-development journey. I mean, first of all, obviously, it takes more time than getting used to a new phone, one thing, and then obviously the other thing, it's actual work, and most of the time, it's also uncomfortable work, right? Because you review some of your beliefs and principles and values that you have, and that means also you need to go back and see, okay, where's actually that coming from? How did I develop that? Do I want to keep that one, or is there kind of an unlearning process? And obviously, unlearning is also not straightforward. So there's all of these kind of things, and can be uncomfortable, can be overwhelming at times, and this is the almost the problem with self-development, self-consciousness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always like that quote by Brené Brown that says, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And
true
that's
indeed.
that's kind of where it's at. I mean, for you guys, you've been, I believe, self-managing, is it for around five years now? I mean,
6 years. Yeah.
6 years, wow. What has been the biggest lesson for you personally, sort of taking this journey?
Well, I guess one of the things that I learned as a leader, because I also went through traditional leadership positions and leadership trainings and whatnot, is first of all, I don't have the answer for everything, and the other one is I don't need to have the answer for everything. And so this is something that I needed to, well, first of all, unlearn and then learn in a different way, I guess. So that's definitely interesting, and also just because many of our people in the team didn't do consultancy before, right? They're coming from all sorts of different areas, from big corporates partially, but also from all sorts of other areas. And I've been doing consultancy for a while, obviously. So you kind of tend to think, or I tend to think at least, I know that industry, I know what I'm doing more or less. And then it is self-managed, which means people come up with ideas that I would think, is completely stupid. I'm pretty sure that will not work. Now, first of all, you need to let go of that stuff, obviously, and just provide the room and freedom there. On the other hand side, as a founder, you got a certain accountability that we are not completely messing up the business, and we need to lay off people, right? So this is an interesting balance, and this is just something that's not black and white. So I guess there's also that space anyway, autonomy and alignment balance that we always talk about. It is good to read the books, and you will never meet that balance anyway, so it's almost like you need to rebalance every time. So this is certainly something I learned, because I also got, I'm fairly impatient person, which means, talking 27 times about purpose is not necessarily my favorite topic. So, and I get impatient with it, and I'm like, well, we discussed that 25 times, how is that still a question? So these are things that I've learned over time to at least deal with. I'm not saying I'm almost comfortable with it, but getting there. So that's that. And then I think the other thing maybe is, um, there's a room and time for, if you look at situational leadership, for different leadership styles, and there is a room in a self-organized company for directive leadership, depend on the situation, but it is temporary, obviously, and it's not imposed by hierarchical structures. It's imposed by all sorts of other things, but we do have hierarchy for certain topics, and we do have leadership, obviously, and people do need leadership. And again, there is a place in the time for directive leadership as well, which I would have kind of almost disbanded from that space before.
God, it's so fascinating to hear you sort of share that, and it's true, isn't it? That kind of that impatience you get when you're going through change. You're like, come on, let's just do it.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, actually, yeah, we kind of need to take it slowly. I
absolutely.
love that. I mean, for the past sort of, you've got 6 years of experience doing this now, plus Teal Around the World, which is an international conference of so many different organizations kind of picking up these methods. And there's so many fascinating things out there, like we've talked about, the self-set salaries, no bosses.
Mm.
um I mean, I suppose to many people, I mean, I certainly feel this way, when I come to that conference, is that we're quite behind here in the UK. We're struggling behind. And it's really amazing being part of that conference because you see an international cohort of people adopting this. Um, and some of the things that are spoken about feel radical to some people, but they're not. And you're kind of ahead of the curve, as it were. So I'd love to know, what do you think is like the next thing that's going to be changed, or that's going to be gone completely from work? I would love to get your kind of insight on that.
Well, if I would know, right? So I guess some things we see changing right now, and it will probably accelerate even more. Is that whole question: is work a place? Is work a location? And the answer, to an extent, you already got. I mean, you see certain CEOs calling people back in 5 days a week, which leads to 20, 30, 40% of them quitting. So there's a development there where I'd say it probably gets more location agnostic. So this is certainly a trend that you see. The whole asynchronous way of communicating, the whole digital way of collaborating will obviously get bigger and bigger. So there's also questions that we have. If we meet less and less in a physical space, then how do we keep that connection as a team? How do you keep that belonging, home kind of feeling? Right? So these are questions that will become bigger and bigger, I think. Um, is there a next kind of operating model or framework out there? I'm pretty sure there will be a million frameworks coming anyway, but then again, is it radically different, or is it more like um a question how you change the broader system, like how we operate as a society, how we operate in economy, generally speaking, right? And if you listen, for example, Teal Around the World, to Gary Hamel, who obviously did research on that topic for decades already, he's going away from actually it's not good enough to change how certain organizations operate. We need to have a bigger almost review and change the system fundamentally. So is that something that's to come? I don't know, but that's definitely something that I would wish for, because I do think that certain aspects of the system are fundamentally broken. So in that sense, we'd probably need that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, definitely. It's really difficult, I think, as well, because as people that are maybe reading these books or coming to these conferences, who maybe aren't at that founder or leadership level, it can be like they've kind of had their eyes opened to this amazing way that work can be, but then they're still kind of stuck in very hierarchical and bureaucratic organizations. So, I mean, do you have any practical tips for people who can be a bit more disruptive, or how they can kind of start being a catalyst for change when they're maybe not at that senior level?
Hmm. I mean, put simply, right, just leave the victim loop and go back to your accountability loop and do what you can do, because there's always a playing field that we have. So there's something we all can change. There's all of us have something that we can influence and do differently, and might be just my own behavior, but this is a good starting point. Will you be able to, I don't know, change your budgeting processes in a big organization? Well, I guess that's unlikely. And again, you can probably make a difference in a day-to-day how you run your budget planning meetings, maybe, at least, right? So that's a small step, but it is a step. So I would always say, go start with yourself. That's a good point. And then obviously think for your team, for your business unit, whatever kind of level of influence you have, and take it from there. There's a certain aspect of change that always happens bottom up anyway, right? And then there's certain aspects, obviously, if you want to change some of these big cross company processes that require huge governance changes, then obviously you need top level support. Otherwise, it's going to be cumbersome. But there is more than enough that you can change. Also, how you interact on a day to day with your team. Do you take time for virtual coffee meetings if you don't meet face to face anymore? And that's stuff that you can decide yourself. There's no whatever CEO that you need an approval for. I hope, at least. So there's that I would say you can always make a difference in your little setup in your area, and maybe it's also not for the line team, is maybe for a project as well. Why not, right? There's always that where I'd say organizations benefit from the rebels who dare to speak up, because this whole speak up culture, this daring to fail thing, is obviously something we're lacking in most big organizations. So it's actually something that's really valuable for these big organizations, that some people, it's probably 1 to 3% of the population, are doing that, and that's maybe also something to consider for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I love that kind of that integrity piece, really, isn't it? It's kind of like what you believe in. Don't lose your integrity because of the structure that you're within. Like you can still play your part in whatever capacity that is. You don't have to have some kind of power in quotes. You've got power to change things in your arena. So that's some amazing advice. Thank you, Tim. I mean, from your experience of working with organizations to kind of adopt this self-management um, way of being, basically, what are some of the amazing things that you've seen shift? What's really inspired you that this is the way that it needs to work? Because obviously you are a self-managing organization yourself, but I know you support others in adopting this as well. So what's really inspired you on this journey?
Hmm. I think one thing that's always, and again, inspiring is, you talk to these leaders, leadership teams, whatever, and you try to shape the transformation journey and the bigger umbrella initiative in a way, and then they'll always go talk about certain people and say, Lizzie, she's nice, but she won't get it, and she will not make the change, and let's just not bother, kind of. And the thing is, in like 90% of the cases, the persons that they name is actually the ones who are flourishing, who make that change, who are the stars of the transformation at the end of the day. So I find it amazing that these partially really little changes actually provide a nice stage for some people to really flourish, and pick up certain feeling of purpose and meaning in their work again. So that's something that's really inspiring to see, and I mean, people are deeply grateful, obviously, for that experience, that they finally can change things and that they can flourish. So that's really nice to see. And then obviously on a broader scale, there's always these topics as well, where people in the first place say, what, we can't change this, we can't change that, we've tried that before, we can't do away from performance management and whatnot. And you know what, most of the times they actually can. It just takes a while to, I guess, be courageous enough to question certain things, or just say, what, we'll fly under the radar, we will not tell anybody, but what, we'll do performance ratings as a team, bottom up, together. Nobody will care, because you're still fulfilling the process in a way, and you satisfy the system. And this is also nice to see that after a while, people really try to do things in their remit, really. And it's just good to see that certain things that never been possible before actually would have been challenged, first minute, are actually possible, and they just try it out. And same as for me, where I think, what, that will never work, and people just try it out because they don't listen to me. And then I figured, what, actually it does work, and actually it's really nice, and I thought it would never. So this is also true for client work, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that when you're kind of saying, yeah, there's always that person where you're like, this person definitely won't like this. And then all of a sudden they're the ones really being the champions of it. It's so true. I really love that. Yeah, that kind of reflection. I think as well, like you mentioned, it's one of those things where adopting it, and having that curiosity mindset to kind of pull things apart and be a bit playful with things rather than thinking, oh, it always needs to be this way. I think there comes a lot of curiosity mindset in it as well, which I always really love hearing how people have taken something that's maybe always been done that way, as they say, and then they're like, oh, actually all of a sudden it's this way. And also, I don't know about you, from your experience about kind of supporting teams in adopting this self-managed approach, is how much it begins to make them think about other areas. So education or politics, it really opens up so much. I mean, I don't know whether you've seen that, because I mean, I've seen a lot of movement happening in kind of like the education sector as well, about how we educate so differently now as well.
Absolutely. And one of my hobby projects for some weekends is, what we call just working title Teal Schools. Obviously, not going to be that, but that's one of the things we also believe in, is like our way of educating young people is probably not fitting current reality. And the whole setup, the whole system also doesn't work in a way. And if you look at Ricardo Semler and Lumia schools, for example, there's a pretty good example in the UK actually with Fren Wilbur there, right, leading that school, and there are things happening. So I do think that this is an interesting place, especially if you get kids like myself, the stuff you care about. If you look into politics, I mean, clearly we have a way to go there to really change some things, and I think there are good things happening. Also, same as for companies and organizations. The question is, how do you create that impact to also um, do that on a broader scale? Like going back to schools. I love Lumia schools, and it's a great concept, and it's a private school. So we kind of the gap gets bigger and bigger because we only kind of elite type of group that will have access to that kind of way of education is
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing seeing everything kind of come out, and like even listening to Jos de Blok, Bortzberg, like every time his keynote speech just fascinates me so much, because it's just, he's doing something, they're taking it a bit further, and it's like, wow, we're just seeing this movement grow and grow, which is just amazing. I mean, one thing I think I would love to hear from you is, we've had so many experiences shape the way we work. And especially over these 2 years, now more than ever, we're thinking about this way of working, hybrid working, and maybe being a bit more open-minded to, for example, I've seen a lot more happening here in the UK around self-managed organizations. So it's kind of picking up. And I think sometimes those experiences help us to think differently. I mean, just from whether it's your personal, professional experience, has there been one thing that's really changed the way you think about things? Has there ever been like that catalyst moment in your life where you're like, this has totally made me think differently?
Oh, there's probably many moments. I think also in certain leadership trainings back in the old life, I think kids change a lot because they're a pretty good mirror for all of your behaviors that also you didn't want to develop ever. But kids are just mirroring that back, and you're like, oh shit, that sounds like my dad or something. So there's these moments. But I think there's one example with COVID, since you also mentioned hybrid way of working and so on, and just yeah, bit more than 2 years ago, we had a weekly team meeting, and it was always on site, it was face to face, and we would meet in the office. And I was the first one, whatever, in 2019, saying, you know what, we should keep that face to face moment. It's really important to connect, and we should meet, and la la la. And I don't think it's going to work virtually. Which obviously just in April 2020, there was simply no choice. So we obviously met virtually as a team, and turns out obviously it worked fine. I'm not saying it's not worth having this quality face-to-face connection here and there, but certainly not needed on a weekly basis. Obviously, the team is now further distributed anyway, so even if we wanted to, we couldn't go back to face-to-face, I guess. But that's a pretty simple moment. It was obviously wrong. Team meeting does work virtually, and obviously there's a downstream effect where you would question certain other meetings, and there need to be face to face. There's work with clients where we're like, well, I'm happy to come over and run the workshop face to face, but you'll pay travel, and it's time and whatnot, and do we really need that? It's pretty straightforward content work here, so what's the point? So this is interesting to see how we are forced to think differently. And also going back to schools, if you look in Germany, and I'm living on the German side of the Swiss-French-German border there, and obviously if you look at digitalization, Germany is like a third world country anyway. So we are much worse than Nigeria, for example. And if you look at school, everyone is like, well, you can't teach virtually. You need to be in a classroom, obviously, and you probably would have discussed for another decade if that was even possible. And now, obviously, April 2020, May 2020, there was just no choice, right? So we switched virtual, and look at that. To an extent, we can do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, yeah, didn't it? I mean, I don't think I've ever learned something so quickly than Zoom, thanks to
Absolutely.
COVID. How quickly we can learn things when we need to.
Right, and I mean, one thing that we can learn from a change perspective is also, if you change the system around you, if you change the structure around you, it's relatively straightforward for human beings to adjust their behaviors according to that structure around you. Which also means, one is the mindset side that you always need to work on, obviously, but it's the other side. If you don't change your structure, if everything looks the same, feels the same, it's incredibly difficult to change behavior. Or the other way around, if you change structure, you'll enable certain behaviors and certain learning paths relatively quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an important point. Yeah, the environment that you're in is so powerful to your behaviors and habits. Yeah, that's
Mm,
such a good point, Tim. So I thought I'd do a bit of a fun thing in this this season and do a quick fire round if you're up for it, Tim.
sure.
So here we go. When not at work, where will we find you?
Probably in the garden or in nature.
Nice. One business word you want to completely remove from the dictionary.
Strategy.
One book recommendation or podcast.
I'm not gonna say Frederic Laloux reinventing organizations because that's probably a bit boring. Now, one book that I really do like is Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan.
Amazing. And if there's one thing you could disrupt, what would it be?
Our way of educating young people. So school systems, I guess, are top of my list at the moment.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that resonates with a lot of people at the moment. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for joining me today. For those of you listening, I highly recommend joining Teal Around the World. I will add a link because I know, it can feel really lonely when you're going through wanting to change things, but that community makes you feel like there's lots of people around you and a great support network. Plus, you learn so much. And I will obviously link everything about LIVESciences as well. So thank you so much, Tim, for your time.
Thank you, Lizzie. Pleasure.
You've been listening to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture Podcast.